Kenna. Maybe the last episode for today. But we are continuing with this. We have all these Toshi missions. Let's do them. Still listening to Archipy. Which one is this? This is Fear, right?
So really an incredible job by Jeremy. And I think he's also fortunate in that he never has to backstab an ally. It never happens. And for a guy who has such great relationships, he ends up being on the wrong side of the vote on a couple of occasions. But he's on the wrong side of the vote when people take out people. Like, it's almost like that they did him a favor at a couple of different points. Where if Andrew Savage doesn't get idled out of the game by Kelly Wentworth, I think that ultimately that becomes a more complicated situation for Jeremy. If Steven Fishback doesn't go out, I think that at some point, like that alliance is going to fracture maybe in a different way. In the way that it did happen, Savage goes to the jury and it's like, oh, Jeremy, loyal guy, love him. Steven, of course, after Jeremy plays the idol, love that guy. Didn't have to stab Spencer in the back. Didn't have to stab Tosh in the back because he went to the finals. So really, nobody got burned by Jeremy. So it was such a. I mean, maybe the worst you could say was that had to turn on Kimmy, but she turned on him first, where the jury didn't like necessarily that he was skipping at the final tribal or at the final 6 tribal council. So that it really was like he was great, and I think it also he was fortunate that his enemies took out the people that were ultimately like his shields along the way and never put the target on him. Well, that's the advantage of a shield, right? I mean, like, it's almost by design that these shields will be built necessarily. They're not going to be targeted by you necessarily. They're going to be targeted by everyone else. So it really, it's just a matter of counting the right number of shields that you have in front of you, so that when you get to the finals, they're all gone, or you beat them in the end. And actually, that's something that he sort of said. I'm
just gonna do this because I know there's a trophy for it.
That it's not just that they were people who would take bullets in front of him. They were people that he might be more well liked than. Yeah. Or people were at least people who were less popular than him. So, which is interesting that he can finagle that. Sometimes you take out the popular person, but for some reason he was able to posture himself that he only took bullets. What was it, at the final 6? Was that the only time he was targeted? If I remember, I think that's it. Yeah, where Kimmy ultimately wants to turn around and flip on Jeremy. So just a really incredible job by Jeremy all the way through, and that his final tribal council, just at the end when he reveals that how he wanted to tell them the whole time that Val was pregnant, and how she came out there and she told them that.
Oh, I'm an idiot. I forgot about that. I'm an idiot. I forgot about that. At the end of the last episode, they did tell us the thing.
This is for Cameron. This is for my son.
There we go. I'm a fucking idiot. I forgot about that.
It's just like Jeremy just connects with the audience and ultimately the jury in just such a powerful way. Yeah, I mean, at that point, he is. He has that sort of last footballer spike at the end, which is also, I'm doing this for a very personal family reason. Yeah. So at that point, if there are people who might be on the fence, I mean, they feel good about voting for the guy. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people on the fence. Oh yeah, I mean, to be clear, yeah, I don't think that. Yeah, I know that there's some. I've seen people say in the past that he won because of that. I never bought that. No, he clearly positioned himself well at the end. But it's a very nice way to make everyone feel great about what they're about to do. Why it was such a blowout. When they all did a lot of very interesting things in the game. Yeah. I do think that a big part of the season's theme, which maybe might have been lost on me at the time, is the idea of family, and especially parents. I do think that this also was very present in Winners of War.
No, what the fuck? How am I supposed to do this?
Nobody else knows what it's like to leave our families like you do, and I think that that's also one of the reasons why Jeremy is just such a threat at the end of the game, because just like what a man that he is.
I mean, I think that this season, I think just by nature of being All-Star and it's a chance season, I didn't check the median age or anything of these players, but I can only imagine it's significantly older for that reason. So they have statistically more parents in that way. So something to keep in mind if you're on a season like this and all the demographics of the players can shape the narrative of what's valued. You know, and so that's what I think we'll watch.
It didn't matter if Millennials versus Gen X. Well, Ted said it, and he said it in the game. You should consider voting for her. And talk about, some of the various survival which in that makes the media law. And this other one.
Yeah, that's the question. There's the point. I mean, you watch a lot of these consistent narratives. There's maybe some parents that might bond, but I don't see it as like an emergent theme in a lot of the other seasons. Is that your understanding when we're watching, what, 32 of them now? Or
Honestly, I'm wondering if I
So what I should
mentioned
do?
Ken but it bears more research. But I just think that it was palpable here, the idea of who has a family, and I think winners and worse, especially when they bring out everybody's kids. I think it would be very hard for a person who doesn't have children to come into that scenario and then ultimately beat out somebody who is playing for quote unquote La Familia.
I definitely see that being the case. Well, that's good. I look forward to getting to the other theme of the season. Did they mention it was their second chance? 50 times per episode? Yeah, we'll get into that.
Did they mention that Spencer has grown since the last time he played?
Did he? Is he going to try to have feelings this time? I wasn't sure about that this time. But I think that there's another takeaway I have this season overall. It is way more team heavy, I think, than any season, maybe up until this point, and maybe even since. Because, I mean, one, you mentioned the strength of the second chance narrative. It is powerful for the season, but like everything is framed in that particular way. And it might be the start of, because the first season after this is Millennials Gen X, which also tried to hammer the theme for a long time. I'm like, as a millennial, as a Gen Xer.
Well, twofold, because Millennials versus Gen X, and I really touched on this when we did that panel a couple weeks ago with Kirsten McGinnis and Asia Wells, that not just the theme of the Millennials and the Gen X, but the theme of growth, the theme of how has coming out here, whereas that in Second Chances, the theme is like, this is how I've grown since the last time I played. The first time I played Survivor changed me, and now you're seeing the results of that growth. Millennials versus Gen X actually speeds up that whole process. That on day one of the game, I was this person, but now I am this person who can do anything now because of my experience in Survivor, not my experience that I had from Survivor.
I mean, I can just talk about experience of David versus Goliath. I mean, you get a sense that narrative is there, and the show is looking for a way to fill that narrative with the experiences that are happening. That over the course of this 39-day experience, if you get that far, you have changed. They wanted a David that would become a Goliath. It's kind of is what you get the sense of what they're looking for. And I think so. If we're talking about how this shapes the show from there forward, I think they have a much heavier, like they're leaning much more heavily on the theme of the season. It was hard to do that in Heroes, Healers, Hustlers, and I don't think anyone tried to say in the end, I was a hustler, but now I'm a healer. I don't think they tried that, but Ghost Island, they wanted to have the stakes of past voting earnings, like the finale or something like that.
Can you learn from the mistakes that others made? And so, yeah, it's almost like a second chance is built in of like, okay, here's the thing that this person screwed up. Like, can you take what they did wrong and then correct it?
I'm going.
Right, and it'll be interesting. I know we'll talk about this actual season. I know, but like we have season 41 coming out, which is only called season 41.
Yeah.
It's not so. I think I did actually get Dalton Ross questionnaire.
Yeah.
And one of the things I talked about was like one thing I hope to do in the future is they kind of let the players define the theme a bit. So, because it's kind of a little heavy-handed at times. So, we'll see if that happens in this future season. So,
I don't know where I can go.
We're talking so much about the use of themes and this theme here that what should be the takeaway in terms of like what Survivor should be trying to do? Because I think that we're on the same page in that it does get away from them a little bit as they're like I feel like in the 30s I feel like that they're trying to chase some of the things that work well in the early parts of the 30s and sort of like manufacture them.
Yeah, I definitely have that sense. Like for instance, like even just in terms of the mechanics of what's going on, like that final 6 vote, which I can't talk enough about, where all votes are canceled. That's like the awesome version of Vandergeddon.
Yeah.
Like it's like the Vandergeddon is like the horrible version of that. You know, so it gets sort of resurrected back. I mean, the reverse Ghost Island.
I'm going back.
Success. And but in
I do like this music.
Theming, I don't need to have theme to the show. It doesn't necessarily need to be the title. Like, but let the theme like emerge from the scenes. It'll happen naturally. And then when they're editing the show together, they can pull out the parts earlier on in the season that seem to reflect that theme when they're telling the story.
Yeah.
Then it feels more natural and coming from the players.
Wait, what do I do with this?
No, producers saying, tell me again why this is your second chance. So again, second chance is a great theme, and I think it worked out. So I think there's a potential for more of them if they emerge a bit more organically.
Yeah, that's really smart because it's not like you wouldn't like then. I'm trying to think of like what is it? It's like you wouldn't like
there's the
tell the story of like a sporting event of like this is of course the game, and then you tell us like what the story of the game was before it plays out, and then only like look at this game through this prism. I'm sure it does happen sometimes in television broadcasting, but yeah, that's such a great point of just like let it play out and then go back and then highlight what ultimately, where it's going, give us clues along the way, as opposed to like steering the story towards what we want it to be.
Yeah, I mean, and that will lead to more variety as well, more variance in the game. I mean, because like producers, if they have an idea for a theme, that doesn't come from their brains, and they're probably a small brain trust of brain people. But when you're bringing in, you're by definition bringing in all these very interesting and motivated people from all over the country. They might have something to contribute to this. And nowadays, I think the casting is so solid that there are very few people who don't come in and want to make their mark on the game. I think that they're going to generate plenty of ideas that can then be molded after the fact.
We'll be right back talking through this season at large of Survivor Chances with Dr. Christian Kubicki. But first, let me take a moment to thank our sponsor of this episode of the podcast. These are our friends over at KiwiCo. Of course, KiwiCo creation for Trail Point to lift object every month. And I guess we're going to talk through this in a couple of different segments. And let's talk about the pre-swap game. These are going to be just the first 2 episodes. This is the season also. Survivor is going to expectations of the players. The show has gone from 2 tribes to 3 tribes so quickly, and then we're going to go 2 tribes, but only for 1 month.
Yeah, and I think that this is, if you're going to do that, this is the season to do it because you know these people already, or have, like they're kind of pre-established, right? So you can swap them around more, and you can still, and you don't have to identify them, but you already know who they are, so you don't need to have to spend more time with them before you switch them up. So I think that works here, and this is another thing that plays into what I think ultimately becomes this prevailing voting block thing, that everyone's got actual time with each other in addition to already knowing who they were in the first place. So yeah, they play with their expectations a lot. Even in the first episode, they go to tribal council immediately after the challenge. That's one of the things my notes I forgot that they did.
Yes.
So like, and again, it's kind of like what they try to do again in Game Changers. Where with Game Changers, where they're like, hey, not only you're all going to tribal council together, and we'll be tribal. It's like they try to play with the expectations of the All Stars.
I'm excited. Look at what I'm doing.
Walk them through the Angkor Wat Temple, and this is really like a throwback to Survivor China, where they walk them through.
Oh, is this all like separate?
Season started.
Oh.
It felt really epic. I mean, I like the way that they take it through this location with a lot of history and and having the survivors
God damn it.
walk through the temple. You get a sense of the location, something we haven't really gotten in a while. And so it was nice to throw back to there's something about the color scheme. Something to do with the color scheme on the show. It makes it feel red. I'm not a film guy, but what stuck out to me was an attempt to sort of give you a visual gestalt that you might not get in another season. And so it all felt really interesting. And then they put them on little canoes, and then they start the game.
Okay. We have a marooming. Anything about the show's opening that you want to highlight?
Well, I shouldn't do all my notes here. It's 20 hours, so let me pick out the highlights here. I mean, so you've got, I think that the one, you know, a little bit about what's going on in the show, just from who is trying to be like the anchor of these challenges. Like Kelly Wigglesworth, I think the one thing she wanted to do was like anchor these challenges. It felt like, because she enjoyed the ruining and they have to go and swim for the rice basket or something like that, and Kelly Wigglesworth decides to go swimming for it. That's the one of the things that jumped out. Yeah. So, but they Blue gets the food. If I recall, you call it the bag.
Observation, I watched so many Survivor seasons. The food never really seemed to come up in this season. There's so much talk about, like, do you think that they got a lot of food in this season, or do you think that these were just like grizzled veterans and then there was just like not a lot of talk about the food?
It's hard to say because it surely looked like.
Oh, that's how I get
comes to mind for sure. Yeah, I think it was more the rain. A lot of people didn't want the food to come up at Angkor. It's like, I'm thinking, and Angkor went into that spot. So maybe they were good at rationing whatever food they got from the movie. For all I know, it's hard to say. But yeah,
Maybe
it
they
comes
gave
at a
them
time.
so little food that it was like a non-starter of like how much rice should we eat? Like, we were out of rice.
Yeah, eventually it's more people during the rain.
So, let's talk through the two tribes. And I'll start with KO. Which really is an overlay for old school Survivor and new school Survivor. And really at the center of that, we have Spencer and Shireen, who are really sort of like billed as like, hey, this is where Survivor is going. They played in season 28 and season 30, and these two, this is all about where Survivor is headed, as opposed to the people who are the shelter people, or the Terry and Kelly. Wu is with that, even though he's a little bit of a throwback, even though he played in 28. Vetus is with them, although he does play like a very aggressive game. The thing that really jumped out to me that I would love to get your take on is that Shireen and Spencer are shown as like players who like understand this is where the game is going, and ultimately, Christian, did the game go in that direction?
I have to say, if you're defining it in this game context of like, there is this crazy calculation, people go home to the crazy calculations about what is better for you at some point down the road. Certainly this season, that's where it went. I mean, undeniably, especially after the merge. It definitely went that way. I would say in more recent seasons, like yes, it definitely went that way. I mean, I'm thinking about some of those boats entering extinction. I'm like, they're flying all over the place. It did go that way. Now could that be toned down a bit? I think I'm a person that could go with it being toned down a bit. I think it's shown that it can be super interesting.
Yeah.
I think that this season one thing I love about it is just crazy enough, but you can still follow it in a 42 minutes of television.
Yeah.
And so it did it in prophetic, in part because the show wants to go that way, because I think that they fear, every season they fear that one big tribe's going to pick off a smaller tribe. I think they fear that, and so I think there's a lot of incentive now to keep the game sped up.
So, in just thinking it through, though, because we know ultimately we're going to see, put on the side, but what happened before this. All happen where, when we take a look at the people who are going to go on to win the game following this, Adam, Sarah Lucina, Ben, a little bit of a different story because of what goes on with all the proliferation of the hidden immunity idols, which there are a lot here, but it's not overpowered by just one person. It's Jeremy and Kelly just like hoarding them themselves and using them at opportune times. And then you have Wendell. You have, of course, Nick. You have Chris Underwood, which I think I'd put that in the same category as Ben, of somebody who really benefited by different twists in the game. And then you have Tommy, and ultimately Tony. And I kind of feel like that the person who is sort of just like the game body type person that is just all the numbers. I don't think that person ultimately did go on to dominate the game in the 30s.
Oh, we're talking about the kind of that particular character. I was sort of talking about the overall tenor of the season, what tends to dominate the gameplay.
What am I doing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say honestly the game body's person of those people, and I mean this with every compliment, is Nick. Nick is constantly thinking about the games and the voting and the combinations. Because he externalized it. I think that's something that Spencer does all the time. I mean, this is if you're on kind of the person who likes the same things that I do in a season, where you want the players to be really thinking things out and trying to come up with a clever way to get a little further or to turn a plan on itself, this is a great season for that. I mean, I don't think it's hard to come up with a better season. Maybe a winner's
What am I missing?
for that. So it works really well here. And Spencer's the one with it, right? So I guess there isn't.
I don't get what I'm missing here.
Todd, for instance, that has gone on to win since then. If that's your I think that's right. I think you're right.
So I feel like it's sort of like a combination when we look at players like an Adam or Sarah or
Adam, I think is Adam, Sarah. I forgot about them. I apologize.
Yeah,
I didn't make an example.
But I think what they did was they combined that they are willing to make big moves and turn on their allies, but they also play very strong social games also. And I feel like that the idea of voting blocks and just numbers without the important social connections that the players build, we're not ready to say goodbye to that. I don't believe
Was that not in?
You can't do both. There's almost I think that now more than ever, people are willing to forgive for blindsiding them. So I think that it's totally fine. I don't see. My hypothesis is that if Spencer just had maybe one extra skill set in terms of relating to people, I mean, I feel like there's no reason that he couldn't have been a winning player. I'm not sure if Jeremy's was tough to beat, but and Spencer being the avatar in this short.
What am I doing?
Oh my gosh, it's so good. She was shot out of a cannon in that premiere. Or a Shireen, you definitely need the jury to want to vote for you.
I don't get what I'm doing here.
So, also, you mentioned it in the opening. Abby Maria is such an interesting figure here in this story because I just watched Survivor Philippines and talked about it on the podcast a week ago, and so Just a little bit of a different Abby Maria here in this season, because I feel like that here in Abby Maria is almost like the Precious here in this season, where that every single person thinks like,
is there like they have to go in specific spots?
I'm gonna use Abby Maria, and then ultimately,
they have different masks on them.
That it doesn't end up,
I think.
except for maybe Kelly Wentworth. There's not a person where it doesn't end up backfiring on them spectacularly.
It was almost like clockwork that it would happen. Like I was watching the season and I
okay.
well,
I get it now. That's why we have to fight enemies in there.
That Tasha, after the first swap was working with Abby Maria, and I'm thinking like, even one episode, she's gonna turn on her. And so like clockwork, it happened. And everyone wants to
people don't want
it just never works. It's like there are science fiction shows where there are analogies to nuclear weapons. I used to watch Stargate, and like they would find this material that everyone wanted to weaponize, but it literally blew up in their face. And that's where
there we go.
I
got it.
But the Precious, I think, is a better known reference. We'll go with that.
Do not F with Abby Maria, and it is different than in Smart Philippines, because in Smart Philippines, Abby really, she has like a good relationship with RC at the beginning of the story, but ultimately after that, she's really just locked in with Pete and Artis, and nobody wants to give Abby Maria the time of day. And here in this season, every single person says like, Abby, I understand you. Come on, Abby. Like I get it. Like, why don't you come with us? We'll keep you safe. Let's work together. And then, for whatever reason, that there does not seem to be an Abby Maria whisperer that can keep her feeling good. And I don't know exactly what it is, but it feels like that we see it. I think most plainly in the vote where Steven goes home, where on Survivor you really have to be able to trust your allies. And I think that Abby Maria may have some trust issues where that Steven goes and again, feels to Abby Maria, but really what he was trying to do is split the vote to use Abby as the backup plan. But when Steven talks to Abby Maria, sometimes we're voting out Joe, and then when she's watching them, sometimes you do on Survivor have to watch somebody go and talk to the opposition, because they're going to be selling them their products, and you have to be able to trust them. It's easy to put someone as many scenes where she seems like people are just feel that conversation, and it's almost like you see
He stopped? I was like, why is he doing it? Whoa.
okay, like I'll vote with this group. I mean, she ultimately does end up like bouncing around, but I don't think that that's her preferred method of play.
Well, I mean, it would have to be, and especially if she sees someone who's a friend talking to someone who she's not deem a friend.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, yeah, this is not the game for her because, yeah, you're right. The voting blocks. I mean, I feel like in the merge there were like three. It felt like there were 3 or so camps.
Yeah.
And you have to talk to one of those other 3 camps, those other 2 camps, if you want to, get a plan together. So it creates an environment where everyone's talking to people who are perceived to be enemies, and I think that just did not sit well with her.
Yeah.
I think that it makes sense to me why ultimately when later on when she kind of saddles up with Kelly Sarah, she seems to be on board with them because they're all in this together. They are
nobody's talking to them.
Yeah, exactly. So it kind of works out. So I think that tracks, Rob.
Yeah, and especially here in the beginning of the game, that so much of Abby Maria's game ends up being
that's
based on
personal
sort
growth.
of like
So
who she
yeah, I
has
think
a
we'll end here.
grievance with. It ultimately ends up
Next
driving
episode,
the action because then
continue on.
people see, okay, Abby has a
I don't know.
grievance
Should I
with
do
this
one more?
person. We can woo her on. No pun intended. We could like bring her over to our side, and then you
I probably will.
basically use that as like the motive to get rid of
Yeah,
this other
thanks for watching.
person, and we see it happen to